once you've had an opportunity to write down those questions, we continue our journey from the road and from the parking lot into a new space. You see, Jesus comes into a home, a dwelling place with the disciples. And he knows that things aren't settled. He knows there's still some agitation. Something about the questions that came up on the road are continuing to gnaw at some of the disciples. So, he puts it out there. What are you talking about? And now, listen. Listen. And he takes someone who is close at hand, a little child. We don't even know the child's gender, which I think is a wonderful gift to us in this context. But Jesus takes a small child and puts the child in their midst. And invites them to say that whoever welcomes one such as these welcomes me. And welcomes not just me, but welcomes the one who sent me. So we are invited to think with Jesus and with the disciples about those who may not be as significant in our community here in Calvary or in the larger community. You see, back in Jesus' day, children really didn't have a significant place. Sure, the little ones might fetch water or do minor tasks around the house. But there was an understanding that it wasn't even until they were 4 or 5 that they really had consciousness. And children were really property in a lot of ways. You hope that the son might grow up and take over the house or the land. You hope that a daughter might grow up and marry into another nice family and kind of build an alliance. But when they're young, it's one more mouth to feed. One more piece of the family that you're trying to figure out how to take care of. We have to put ourselves back in that mindset because it's very different than today, where millions and millions of dollars are spent at Babies R Us and Toys R Us on our children, where each of us tends to be significantly invested in what it means to have a good community school or a good charter school that we are a part of, that our kids could go to. It's different then. And we often miss that point. So today, part of our conversation as we hear Jesus talking about this is to think also about who would he pull into the middle. Who would Jesus pull into the middle today and say, whoever welcomes this one welcomes me? Of course, one of the things that's beautiful about children is we like to create kind of this myth around them that they are innocent and pure and holy, which we know after about 4 months or so wears off, right? But there is that piece of innocence. And oftentimes when we think about someone being drawn into the center, we like to imagine how they have ended up where they are. And put reasons behind it and judgment. So as I've been thinking about who Jesus might draw into the middle today, I think about the woman who is not married, who is trying to raise 3 children on her own. And I think how marginalized that might feel in our culture today. But then how people go to, well, you know how she got that way, rather than just dwelling in that place of, is she on the margin? And could we do a better job of welcoming? Or what about the person who's older, who has lived a rich and full life, but now it's harder to get around? And so it's harder to get to some of the community activities. It's harder to stay engaged. And people don't necessarily take the time or the energy to call and check in What happens when Jesus grabs the hand of that person and says, whoever welcomes this one welcomes me? Our list could go on. What about the child of undocumented people born here in the United States whose citizenship is a question mark? What about those who are struggling on the outside, whether it's with homelessness or addiction or doubt? And we're told to draw them into the center, to welcome, without judgment, but rather in a deep sense of wholeness. That becomes a challenge for us today. To think about who is Jesus drawing into our center and saying, pay attention. Certainly it could still be children, but I believe that that vision is much, much larger. And sometimes we tune it out because we can become so wrapped up in the vision of innocence and purity rather than life and tough living. Then the question back to you in that parking lot conversation is, are you ever one of those people that Jesus is drawing? Are you ever one of those people who feels on the outside? Who feels that for whatever reason, there's not quite a place for you, where you don't quite fit, and that Jesus draws you in and says, you are called to be welcomed. Then we have to hear that word for us, that we will sing in just a moment, of, will you let me be your servant? Will you, wherever your journey has been and whatever questions you hold, allow yourself to be drawn into the center of community and cared about in a profound way? Because we live in kind of a doer culture. Sometimes it's hard to be and to be in the center with the love around you. So as we come to this day, 3 things I want you to leave with. One is that there is a place for the questions that the disciples carry with them, that we carry with us. And that we offer them as we offer everything else on our journey in the context of the holy. Secondly, that we are called to imagine and reimagine who is drawn into the center, who is cared about in a profound and new way. And finally, to think about those moments in our lives where we need to be in the center, where we are drawn in so that we might be cared about as Jesus cares about us and Jesus calls us to care for one another and to show forth